music. Thank you.
Yeah, I picked that out. That's where they let me do that. They let me pick the music. Well, thanks again for coming to D.
Sure.
And I thank
Howdy.
you. Thank you in advance for the joint session with Bill Gates we're going to do tonight. We're not going to talk about that now, but thank you for doing that. Let me ask you a question that may seem odd. You've changed the name of Apple this year, and you certainly have this enormous business that I think 10 years ago people wouldn't have expected you to have in music. So what businesses is Apple in?
Yeah, Apple's in 2 businesses today and a hobby, and we're about to add a 3rd business. So we'll very shortly be in 3 businesses and a hobby.
A hobby. Okay.
And the businesses are, one, our Mac business, which we love and is growing really well. The second is our music business, and each of those 2 are about $10 billion businesses for us. And the 3rd business we're about to get in is the phone business, handsets.
You have a phone? You're about to have a phone?
About to have a phone.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And I'll send you one.
Thanks.
And then the hobby is Apple TV. And it's the reason I call it a hobby is because a lot of people have tried and failed to, make that a business. Everybody from, TiVo to Microsoft to, everybody's tried. And it's a hard problem. And so we're trying. And it's a business that's, hundreds of thousands of units a year, but it hasn't really crested, to be millions of units per year. And I think if we work on it and improve things over the next year, 18 months, we can crack that.
I want to come back to that because you have something to show related to Apple TV today. In your first couple of appearances here, I asked you, you gotten good critical reviews on the Macs that you did after you came back to the company, and you introduced the iMac and the new laptops and so forth. But your share, the needle didn't seem to move on your share. From what I can tell, something is happening with share there, or at least with sales. So talk about the Mac business and where you think it is.
Well, we all use Macs at Apple. We love the Mac. And so we're steadily trying to improve things, as everybody in our industry is. And we think we make the best notebooks in the world. We think we make the best desktops in the world. And our share in notebooks is ahead of the industry. We're about 2/3 notebooks, 1/3 desktops, and the industry is about 40% or so notebooks. And we've always been a little ahead there. And I could see a time when notebooks are even going to be 80, 90% of what we sell. We're also always improving our operating system. Generally, we have a release every 18 months or so. And we had a really big release about 18 months ago that we didn't get much credit for, but it was actually Mac OS X Tiger, which is our current release, on Intel. Yeah, because we switched the whole product line to Intel processors. And that's for anyone that's ever tried to do anything like that, that's a huge thing to do. And we did it really well, I think. I mean, it was very seamless for the customers. And so that worked very well. And the growth that we've seen over the last several quarters, really since we got through that Intel transition, has been about 3 times the market growth rate. So we've been picking up market share for the last,
In other words, the overall PC growth rate is X, and Mac growth is 3X.
Yes.
Is that worldwide or U.S.?
That's worldwide.
And in the U.S.,
if you parse out the U.S. numbers, it's even more than that. It approaches 5X.
And your market share is what? Around 6 or something, or am I wrong?
If you measure it worldwide, it's like 3. If you measure it in the U.S., depending on who you listen to, it's 5 to 6. If you look at U.S. retail for notebooks, it's 12. So it depends on how you tweed the numbers together. There aren't really great numbers out there. As an example, if you look at U.S. retail, we have double-digit market share, but it doesn't include our web store, but nor does it include Dell's web store. So since Dell doesn't give us their numbers, we can't really calculate what the consumer market share might be versus the enterprise market share.
This is going to sound like a funny question, but there are people, when you change your name to Apple Inc. and you announced that you were doing the iPhone in addition, of course, to the iPod and the Apple TV, there are people who said, well, this is your gradual exit out of the computer business, the personal computer business. Do you remain committed to the personal computer business?
Oh, yeah, totally. Totally. I mean, as an example, if you come to our Worldwide Developer Conference, which is a week from this coming Monday, we'll have the largest attendance we've ever had there, and we're rolling out the next generation of our operating system, Leopard, which will ship in October. No, it's massive investments we're making in that business. We love it.
Okay. We haven't seen a big change in the iPod. If we put iPhone aside, and you did identify it as a separate business. I know there's an iPod in the iPhone, but for a while, are you planning some big new iPod model or iPod platform or change?
So a while means since last September.
Since last September,
yes,
right?
This is a fast-moving business.
Right.
Yeah, we generally don't talk.
Yeah, but last September you didn't do a whole. It wasn't like you introduced the Nano last September or something like that.
Well, new Nano.
A new Nano, I understand, but I mean, not a whole new model of the iPod.
Okay.
Okay, so.
It sure felt like that with all the work that went into it, but I'll concede to that. So
I wasn't taking your feelings into account. I was just looking
right.
at the, you know.
So as we look forward, all I should really say is that we're working on the best iPods that we've ever worked on, and they're awesome. And I can't wait till they're done.
Okay, all right. Moving right along. What phone are you carrying? Do you have a phone with you?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah? You want to show it? You want to
Sure.
wave it around?
Just a little thing here. Best iPod we've ever made, by the way.
That's the best iPod you've
Best
ever made.
iPod we've ever made. Best phone we've ever made, too.
Yeah, that's great. Are you still on track to ship that
Yeah.
when?
Late June.
Late June.
Yeah.
That means like the very last day of June, or what does that mean?
Yeah. No, I would say in the latter part of June.
The latter part of June, okay. And it'll be available in volume. It's
Sure hope so.
yeah, and well, you and other companies have sometimes shipped products and the
I know.
volume wasn't there right at the beginning, so I'm
I
asking.
think we'll ship a lot of them. Will it be enough? I don't know. I hope not.
Okay. And do you expect to sell most of these at your own stores or through Singular, or do you have?
We're going to be selling these in our own stores and through Singular, which is now the new AT&T.
Yeah, thanks.
And
just like the old AT&T,
Yeah.
yeah.
and they've got
You're a lot nicer to cell phone companies than you were last time you were on the stage here.
You know, it's really interesting.
I don't know what to do.
We've gotten to know some of the players, and we haven't sold a phone yet, but Singular's been really great with us, I have to say.
By leaving you alone, basically.
No, actually not by leaving us alone. They did a deal with us. We did a pretty different kind of deal than they'd ever done before. And it bent a lot of it bent or broke a lot of their rules. They'd never done anything like this. And they did it with us without ever seeing the phone. We wouldn't show it to them. And
so that's what we call due diligence? I mean,
no, you know what it was? It's like, and we kind of did this in return because we don't know much about how they work either. If you talk to great venture capitalists, they'll tell you that they invest in people, not ideas. Even if the ideas are great, they're really investing in the people. And I think Singular invested in us. They took a gamble on us. And likewise, we took a gamble on them. And so I will never forget that.
Why do you think they did it? Do you think they did it because they wanted to associate your brand with theirs? You have a hot brand. They're relaunching their company.
I think they did it for two reasons. The first reason they did it was because music on phones hasn't been so successful so far. And they really wanted to do something good with music on phones, and they knew with the iPod built into the phone, we could do that. The second reason, though, I think is even more profound, and that is that they, along with everyone else in the business, have spent and are spending a fortune to build these 3G networks.
Right.
And so far, there ain't a lot to do with them. People have not voted with their pocketbooks to sign up for video on their phones. It hasn't really worked. So they've got a lot of bandwidth, but these phones are not capable of taking advantage of it because their internet experience is so poor. You've used the internet, or you've tried to use the internet on your phone, and it's terrible. They have lousy browsers. I mean, you don't get the internet. You get the baby internet or the mobile internet or something bizarre. And what people want is the real internet on their phone. And they believe that we could deliver that. And we are going to deliver that. And so we're going to be able to take advantage of some of the investments they're making in this bandwidth, I think, in an entirely new way. We'll see.
And because it's obviously, I mean, your own goals that you set for sales of the iPhone were not gigantic and enormous. I mean, you said, I think, in 2008 you wanted to sell 10 million. Am I right about that? And that's good. I'm not saying it's bad, but I mean, in $1 billion, a billion unit market, that's 1%, right?
Yeah.
So they couldn't have signed the deal with you because they wanted a high volume product per se.
Well, again, a billion units is the worldwide number. The U.S. number is obviously a lot less than that. So since we'll be selling primarily in the U.S. and to some extent in Europe by then, it's a little bit bigger than 1%. But we're newcomers. People have forgotten more than we know about this.
Okay. All right. Any features of the iPhone that you haven't announced that you would like to share with us here today?
No. Sorry.
Well, you brought something new in your hobby business, as you put it, show. Or actually, before we get to that, let's just mention, you put out a press release this morning. I don't know, everybody has been sitting here paying rapt attention to the speakers, but you put out a press release this morning announcing two things. I guess the bigger one was that you've begun to sell these non-copy protected songs on the iTunes store. Right. From EMI. Is it only EMI or?
Right now it's just EMI, but there's zillions of independents that are also jumping on this bandwagon. So as fast as we can now get their stuff encoded, you'll see more and more on there.
Okay, and those...
as we've said before, I think over half the songs we offer on iTunes will be offered in what we call iTunes Plus, which is our DRM-free, higher quality audio versions by the end of this calendar year.
And this is all in the same store. It's all integrated.
Same store. Yeah.
So, but doesn't, one of the things about your store has been it's been pretty simple. Isn't this going to add complexity?
Well, we worked really hard at that. What we do is the first time you go to buy one of these iTunes Plus songs, it asks you, it says, hey, would you like us to only offer you iTunes Plus where it's available? And most people will say yes if they like iTunes Plus. And so it just substitutes the iTunes Plus song in, just one song, one price, $1.29. And whenever they're available, you get those. So it's pretty simple.
Right.
And then we have another cool thing, which is we're offering people a special offer to upgrade every song that they've ever bought from iTunes to an iTunes Plus version, if it's available, for 30 cents a song or 30% of the current album price, whichever's,
And that's just some automatic syncing process? It just
well, we know what we've sold, so we just download new versions and substitute them. Yeah.
Okay. Any other movement on the record labels coming?
Oh, we're working with them. It's as you know, the music companies ship 90% of their music DRM free today, because all CDs are DRM free, right? And that's how all the music's distributed. So we've gone to them and said, look, you're shipping 90% of your music DRM free. Customers are willing to pay a little bit more to get their downloaded music DRM free too. And why don't we do this? Plus, this solves all the interoperability problems and things like that. And we were successful in persuading EMI, and hopefully over the rest of this year, we'll be successful in persuading most or all of the rest of the labels.
Some people have said, you wrote this open letter about this. A lot of your rivals were already lobbying the record labels for a long time, partly because they thought it was a way to, break your hold on the market or reduce your share because of this idea that there was lock-in. In other words, I buy a bunch of songs protected by your DRM, they're on my iPod. Even if they're only a minority of the songs on the iPod, it makes me much more reluctant to buy a different device, even if something about that device is attractive to me, because I can't play these songs on there. Were you just kind of getting ahead of the train that was already moving when you wrote that letter? And
well, again, if you look at the total number of iPods we've sold, and you look at the total number of songs we've sold on iTunes, it's less than 25 per iPod. So, and the average iPod user has hundreds of songs on their iPod.
Right.
So they're clearly not getting the majority of their songs from iTunes. It turns out they're not even getting even a medium-sized minority from iTunes. And so this whole notion that somehow we have a lock-in, that iTunes is locking people in to buy iPods, is ridiculous. And since iPods can take any, they can take any MP3 from anywhere and play it,
right.
The notion that if you buy an iPod, you get locked into iTunes is equally ridiculous. You can get MP3s from anywhere. Matter of fact, most people do. They rip their CDs or they get music in other ways.
In other ways.
And the vast majority of their music they get in other ways. So the way we've always felt is if we have the best music player, we're going to sell iPods. If we have the best music store, we will continue to pioneer people buying music. And we work really hard on both of them, but we've never felt that one was significantly helping the other. We felt that we had a great solution here, and people were using.
Well, your business, or this part of your business, is really the iPod. I mean, I know that I think you make a little money, or at least you don't lose any money on the iTunes store. But the business is the iPod, not the, the business.
Well, there's three pieces to it. There's the iPod. There's iTunes, the jukebox, which runs on PCs or Macs and is free, right? And you don't even have to use it with an iPod if you don't want to. As a matter of fact, many people don't. And then there's the online store in the cloud, right?
Right. But the iPod is the biggest part. I mean, the iTunes, the client, is free.
Money.
The store doesn't make all that much money because most of whatever I pay for a song goes
to the
label.
Music companies, that's right.
So your big business is the iPod, and the
Correct.
question is, do you jeopardize that when DRM goes away by breaking the kind of the hold or the tie between the store and the.
Well, again, if people are getting the vast majority of music for their iPods from places other than the iTunes store, I think the iPod's winning because it's the best music player. It's the preferred music player. And our philosophy is we better make the best music players if we want to keep winning. So we work real hard at it, and hopefully we will continue to do that.
Is the iPhone a wireless iPod, or is it a phone that has an iPod in it? I know that sounds weird, but I mean, what's the right way for people to think about that?
It's three things. It's the best iPod we've ever made. It's an incredibly great cell phone. People are probably overlooking that part of it, thinking, well, all cell phones are the same. But we've really revolutionized how you use a cell phone. If it was nothing but a cell phone, it'd be really successful. And then the third thing is it's the internet in your pocket for the first time. And if it was any one of those three, it would be successful. If it was just the internet in your pocket, it would be what the Sony Milo aspired to be. If it was just the best iPod we've ever made, we'd sell a lot of them with that. And if it was just a phone, we'd do pretty well with that too. But it's all three of them, and they play off each other.
How much debate was there? I don't even know if you have any debate at Apple. I don't know, but
Lots.
Really?
Yeah.
But I always imagine that it's like the UN Security Council and you have a veto, right?
No, it doesn't work that way. If you want to hire and keep really bright people, then you can't tell them what to do.
Okay.
Very often.
Right. Okay.
Like once a year, maybe twice, you get to do that.
You can just overrule.
You have a silver bullet now and then, but basically you don't do that. So at Apple, it's about ideas, and we argue about ideas constantly.
So, how much argument or debate was there about the decision not to have a physical keyboard on the iPhone?
None.
None.
None. No.
So there's this whole world of millions of people, and if you look at RIM, sales are growing. People who are absolutely addicted to these devices with physical keyboards, and you guys you had no one in Cupertino who thought that was a good idea.
Yeah.
Really? Why? Why not?
For a few reasons. One, once you actually use a touch display like this, it's like, hi there.
That's our official photographer.
I see. My official.
He's taken your picture before, yeah.
Sounds like a machine gun.
All right.
So
well, that could be your next hobby product, you know, a quiet camera. That would be good.
Once you use this magical display, there's no going back. It's unbelievable. And so there's a few advantages. Number one, we actually think we've got a better keyboard. And it takes a few days of getting used to it, you know, like it does with any small keyboard. But I'll bet you dinner that after using it for a week, when you do get your hands on one, you will think it's really great. Really great. Because we can do things.
Pretty gutsy bet, because most of these on-screen, all of these on-screen keyboards I've tried, I have not thought were as good as a physical keyboard. But yours is better.
Yeah, we think so. Again, it takes a week to. Basically, you have to learn how to trust it. Once you learn how to trust it, you fly. Yeah.
Okay.
And the other nice thing about it, of course, is that we can use that physical space for other things when you don't need a keyboard.
Right.
And the other thing, and you can keep changing the user interface as you come up with new ideas, new applications. And we were talking with the folks at Singular one time, and they said, well, we have to have a button for this. And we said, oh, don't worry about that. We'll add it after we ship. And they hadn't seen the phone yet. They didn't know anything about it. And they looked at us like, huh?
Yeah.
We said, don't worry about it. So yes, it provides incredible flexibility to create great user interfaces for different applications, and you don't take up half the space of this thing with a physical keyboard. But in addition to that, once you learn how to trust the keyboard, it's a better keyboard.
How much time do you think you have before people kind of copy at least the overall form factor of the thing? I mean, there are some things around the LG Prada and some other phones that sort of look like this. And I ask that because you were forced, or you made a decision because of the FCC process to announce this thing much earlier than you usually announce products at Apple. And was there a cost to that? I mean, are people going to be able to move faster?
You know, if you zoom out of the whole thing and you say, why does the iPod exist? Why is Apple successful in this business? What would the answer be? It would be because the Japanese consumer electronics companies, who were the preeminent hardware makers of consumer electronics until recently, couldn't do software as well as needed to be done. Right?
Yep.
If you really look at the iPod, it's software. It's a software product in beautiful hardware. It's software in the device. It's, as we said, software on the PC or the Mac, and it's software in the cloud with the store. It's software wrapped in a beautiful package. And the Japanese consumer electronics companies couldn't make the leap to create that kind of software. And that's why Apple enjoys the success it does with the iPod. If you look at handsets, it looks very similar. The handset manufacturers have got their hardware down, but they haven't been able to make the leap to software. And just like with Plays for Sure and stuff, Microsoft has some software that they can go license, but it's on a fairly small number of phones, and it's of a certain caliber. And so if you really look at an iPhone, it's software wrapped in really wonderful hardware. And so people, the usual suspects, will try to copy the hardware. And it will take them some time, and maybe they will, and maybe they won't be able to copy the hardware. But the software is at least 5 years ahead of anything we've seen out there. And it's really hard to do it. We've spent years working on this, but remember that we started with an operating system that we've been working on for well over a decade when we started. And we started with a browser, Safari, which is what's in iPhone. Which is regarded by many as the best browser in the world.
All right, but I have to stop you there.
Yeah.
Does the iPhone, it doesn't really have the entire Mac OS X operating system, which is gigabytes and gigabytes on the computer. It doesn't really have the entire Safari browser, which I don't know how much space it takes up, but more than you've got on the phone, right? I mean.
So the answer is yes, it does. And the entire Mac operating system is, when you get it on a disk, is gigabytes. A lot of it's data. If you take out the data,
What do you mean by data?
Well, we don't need
foreign languages?
Yeah, we don't need every desktop pattern that we ship. We don't need every sound file that we ship. If you take out the data, the operating system is actually not that huge. And if you look at Safari, Safari's not that huge. No, it's got real OS 10, real Safari, real desktop email, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we own those apps, so we could take Safari and take all of that work that we put into it and put a very different user interface on it to work with the multi-touch screen. And if you don't own a browser, that's pretty hard to do. You know, so it's an amazing amount of software.
So theoretically, there's a business decision and a technical issue here. On the technical side, theoretically, could a Mac OS 10 app run on an iPhone if you thought that was a good idea?
Well, we don't think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
And obviously, we don't want to have a mouse on our phone, and we don't have pull-down menus and things like that. So we think there's a very different user interface for the phone.
Okay. Talk to me. I want to get up and do this demo in a second, but to lead up to that, one of the big kind of holy grails has been to have a great pocket internet device, and you're working on that. One has been to connect the internet or the content on your computers and the internet to your TV. And I talked a little to Les Moonves about that. Obviously, Microsoft has, as you pointed out, made some previous efforts.
Sure.
They have a new effort where the Xbox sort of serves that function, and there are, millions of Xboxes out there. This is what Apple TV, I think, is about. Why do you describe it as a hobby? Why isn't it something that is just $2.99? It's
good. I wish.
I mean,
good morning. Good
when
evening.
I tested
And
it,
good
it's
night.
very easy to set up. You can bring it into a house that has absolutely no other Apple products in it. It could be an all Windows household. As long as you have iTunes on those machines, your photos and all that stuff will show up on your TV. Why isn't it like dead simple to imagine people wanting to buy that in large numbers?
I think what everybody's tried, and the place where we've come from too, is coming from the personal computer market. You first think about getting content from your PC into your living room on your widescreen TV. And I'm not so sure that's really what most consumers want. I mean, yeah, it's great to show your photos. It's great to play your music that you have on your PC wirelessly and get that all on there. But we tend to think of that as the entree. And the more we think about this, the more we think that might just be the peas on the side, And that the entree really might be things that you get directly from the internet.
But interestingly, when you introduced Apple TV, it was only the P's that you were talking about. So today,
We're learning.
Today, are you going to talk about the?
Yeah, I brought something to show you if you'd like.
Okay, let's do it.
I'm
telling you, Leopard delayed again. He's so mesmerized by these. I mean,
so again, it's one more piece of the puzzle, but it's amazing how fun it is to watch this stuff in your living room rather than just on your computer.
Okay, so this is the first thing or additional feature of Apple TV that goes right out to the internet and gets you something other than a preview. You can actually get full videos. Why not just build in a feature that lets me go anywhere on the internet and get any video that's out there?
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Are you going to do it?
I think in the fullness of time, I think that all these things are going to percolate from us, from others, and there'll be all sorts of interesting things happening. And we're going to be there with our collection of interesting things.
But you're going to have a collection of interesting things rather than me, the user, with my Apple TV. Like if I have a Mac, I can go anywhere on the internet and see anything. With an Apple TV, it looks like you're doing it in a little more structured way. Why? Why not put some kind of browser, video browser or something on there?
Oh, I think maybe you'll see stuff like that. I think a normal web browser is not necessarily what people want
Right.
In their living room. But I think you will see stuff like that. Yeah.
And so even
Don't-
with
2
human
seconds?
slingshot and the quick change
That's my
lady,
species.
That's that's not going to take it from a hobby to a real business.
I use the word hobby just because it's a little provocative in the sense that the iPod started this way. I mean, the iPod's a really great phenomenon today, and it's a big business today, but it started off little smaller.
Okay.
And it started off
Jake.
feeling a lot like this. So.
Okay. And but you're committed to this.
Totally. Oh, yeah.
Television it's really a set-top
Right,
box.
seconds. I was counting.
No, it's not a set-top box. I mean, that's what screwed us
I don't
up.
mean it's a cable box, but it's
Yeah.
another set-top box, right?
Well, that's not how we look at it. That's what screwed us up for a few years. Is we've wanted to do this for a few years, and we thought of it as a set-top box replacement. And the minute you're going to replace the set-top box, you get into an entire, real gnarly set of problems. You know, because you have to have the cable cards, and you have to kind of go through the cable companies to get to market. And they use this very strange software called OCAP that you have to implement so that you can implement their billing systems and all sorts of other things like that. And we would never, that just isn't something we would choose to do ourselves. And so we didn't do it. We didn't do it because we couldn't see a go-to-market strategy that made sense. But then one day we realized, wait a minute. There's a lot more DVD players out there than there even are set-top boxes. We don't have to replace the set-top box. The DVD player didn't replace the set-top box. We just have to be, we want to be a DVD player for this new internet age. And that's what we can be. And so our model for Apple TV is like a DVD player for the internet.
So when you bring an Apple TV home, or an iPhone actually, and you want to connect it to the computers in your house,
Yeah.
and let's say they're all Windows computers,
Right.
all you need is iTunes software, right?
Right.
You don't need to go into the Windows control panel and set up, you know, they have their method for setting up a network and
Right.
connecting devices and all, but you just take care of that all inside iTunes.
Well, yeah, you did it. You know what it's like.
I know. So the question is, how many copies of iTunes are out there?
Hey guys, so today's going to be a pretty easy day. It's Friday, I have all the classes, 40 minutes each. And it's going to be a lab day. So basically this is time for those of you who were gone on the field trip to catch up, to ask me questions, to get you oriented, and for those of you who are got up to customize your level, mess with your code. Remember yesterday, I had you day for yesterday. Remember Wednesday, we coded that follow player event so that the Slenderman guy follows you. Now right now we're triggering it on begin play. But again, you can trigger that event on a whole bunch of other situations. So maybe when the battery gets to 0 and you can no longer see, that's when the enemy follows you. And so I wonder, as a challenge, can you code something at this point that causes the enemy to stop following you and perhaps disappear from the map or go somewhere else, so that you have this situation where he comes and then he's there and he almost gets you and then he leaves and you don't know where he is. So knowing what you know now, think about that. How would you code something to make it so that the Slenderman enemy character disappears and stops pursuing you after a certain amount of time? And can you set up conditions so that he starts pursuing you not just on begin play, but maybe after you do a certain thing, after you enter a certain area, after you pick up a certain number of batteries, etc. So that's that. And the other just challenge I would pose to you is, can you make a pick-upable item system like a notes system? So in the Slenderman game, you have these notes that you can pick up, and they're like clues, and you have to collect all 8 of them in order to beat the game. Well, you've already done the batteries that you can pick up. Can you duplicate and modify that code, those blueprints, to create a pick-upable note system? So that's that. I'm going to turn up the audio, the music, and everything. And so if you weren't here, I do recommend coming up either to the board, and I'll run through like all of the variable stuff that we did, and calculating the draining of the battery and the flashlight. That's if you're on the SEMA field trip. And other than that, it is lab time, so use this time to experiment and to ask me questions. And if you have questions, I'll do them on the board so that you can also see them in the live stream.
I was definitely more skeptical than customers. And what happened was with the iPod video, boy, they proved us wrong. And a lot of people, we go out and talk to our customers a lot and do a lot of research on that. And video has been the number 1 or 2 reason people have bought that product. And they use it a lot. So, and again, we've sold the better part of 100 million television shows. So it's...
And you have any way to tell whether those are on iPods or primarily being viewed on...
We don't, except by going out and asking people.
Computers.
And it's both. But people have watched a lot of video on those iPods, and the screens are, the screens are small, and they're, $249 and things like that. So I think video's here to stay on portable devices, and I think its use will only grow.
So, but you don't have video. I mean, the iPhone can play video, but you don't have a video service that allows people to download videos, I don't think, on the iPhone, do you?
Sure we do.
You do.
It's just because it's an iPod, all those videos you've bought for your iPod play perfectly on the iPhone.
Right, but I can't download them directly to iPhone, right?
Over the air?
Yeah,
no.
over the air.
No.
Why not? I mean, I mean, you know that a lot of the cell phone carriers, including AT&T, are doing this.
Yeah.
You know that Qualcomm has this whole new, essentially, cell phone television network that they've started. I mean, this is a big deal, and it's a big deal in other countries.
Yeah.
You're bringing out this phone with this.
Well, people have tried it with music so far, and it's failed. And part of the reason that it's failed is that a phone isn't necessarily the best place for discovering or browsing through large catalogs of music to figure out what you want to buy.
All right.
And then when you download it to the phone, it costs more money because the airwaves cost more than the terrestrial internet. And then when you get it on your phone, you've got to sync it back to your PC anyway, because if you lose your phone or trade in your phone, you don't want to lose a few $100s worth of music. So you can either buy it on your phone for more money in a less good environment and sync it back to your PC, or you can buy it on your PC in much bigger screen, easier way to buy, and then sync it to your phone. And we've got 100 million iPods we've sold that people know how to sync to their PCs. They know how to buy music on iTunes, and it's just second nature to just sync it to the iPod.
So you have no plans at the moment to put any version of the iTunes store, either for music or video, on the iPhone itself, despite the fact you have a big screen and you have this non-baby operating system. And
I certainly have nothing to announce today.
Oh, really? Okay. All right. Well, why don't we take some questions, and then we'll go to lunch. Yes, sir.
Hi, Steve. Evan Pagan, Hot Topic Media. I read in an article that you personally still pick up the phone and call to recruit people. And I'm wondering, do you have any tips on what you look for and how you look for it in talent?
Oh, that's a long discussion, but I will say...
Take as long as you'd like.
It's his conference, actually.
I would say that I think, in our businesses, we don't build $4 billion semiconductor fab facilities that provide barriers to entry to competition and things like that. We're not a capital-intensive industry like that.
Yeah.
And so all we are is our ideas, which means all we are is our people. And that's what keeps us going to work in the morning, is a chance to hang around all these great, bright people. So I've always felt and still feel even more strongly that recruiting is like the heart and soul of what we do. And it's really important.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Blake.
Hi, Blake Wolverine from Sling. Two questions, two-part question. One, Steve, you mentioned 3G and the lack of high-quality applications for 3G. Absolutely agree, but the iPhone is a 2.5G phone right now, right? So can you comment on that?
Sure. Well, it's actually a really interesting thing. It's a 2.5G phone plus Wi-Fi. And it automatically switches to Wi-Fi whenever it finds Wi-Fi. And it just switches to the fastest network automatically, and you don't even have to think about it. And, I'm in this industry, and we were the first people to ever ship Wi-Fi in a notebook computer and have the first cheap Wi-Fi base stations out there. So we're really into it. Ship the first G, ship the first N. And so
and you're in the magnet program,
we're really,
class,
we're around Wi-Fi all the time.
so you go get it
The
signed.
iPhone has a
This
feature
stack will be
that when
so
you're,
if you can sure, you come up and just make sure
when you're in a place,
names in there.
if you
the letter.
choose to join a network,
It's
it
a certain
remembers
line
that.
on
If you're
that,
in the
not
same
sure
place,
which.
it just automatically join that
So
network if
make
it's the
sure
fastest
definitely
one.
come get the letter.
But when you're in a place where
the
you've
other
never
aspect
joined a
is
network and it
we
finds
really
them, it'll
do
just
think
alert you to it and say you
projects.
want to join one of these things. And so,
I think last
I live in Palo Alto, so there's a fair amount of Wi-Fi, I would figure, but it's everywhere.
It's
You walk,
I'm gonna have you do something in Unreal.
10
It'll
blocks,
be pretty
and you're going to encounter
open-ended, so it's up to
50
you.
Wi-Fi networks.
But it'll be in
Some of them are people's
form,
personal ones
Brendan,
that you can just
and using the
take a ride on.
Yeah.
Others are in stores of one form or another. It's everywhere. And there's like 10 times more Wi-Fi out there than even I thought there was.
Brainstorm.
And I live in the cities where so Wi-Fi is, of course, way faster than any 3G.
Now.
And Edge turns out to be pretty fast, too, actually, because it's a point-to-point connection. I've been really surprised at how good Edge is.
And then the second question is, you talked about the internet in your pocket, and so I would assume that the whole beauty of the internet is its diversity and its totality. So how is it going to be internet in your pocket when it's over one of these orifices, or through one of these orifices?
Orifices?
Will it be? Yeah, there was a guy who mentioned last year about these orifices.
Oh,
you remember?
Yeah.
How is that going to happen? I mean, the open internet, does that mean it's full-blown internet functionality over the singular network?
Yes. That's what it means.
Great, thanks.
Yeah.
Hi, Brian Quinn from Dow Jones Online. I want to talk about one of Walt's favorite topics, which is advertising. And Apple's done some of the most memorable advertising in history, from the commercial was voted the best of all time, 1984, to the Think Different campaign, to the iPod Silhouette campaign, and the campaign that's advertised that's on now, which I think is just wonderful, the Mac versus PC. The question I asked you, though, is more about media choice. And when you think of Mac, you wouldn't say arguably, but the far superior operating system. But for the most part, Apple has really never advertised Mac on the internet. Those of us who sell online advertising think of what a great opportunity, because 95% of the people that would see your Mac advertising are using the inferior product. And I'm just curious about if you see that as an opportunity that you've missed, or it's just not top of mind. But advertising the Mac,
actually,
a lot of people are using an inferior product would seem to be a good opportunity.
Well, without getting into that, I can say that our Mac versus PC campaign, we do advertise on the internet quite a bit. But not on those porn sites that you talked about.
Over here.
Brian Deere from Eventful. Steve, all indications so far are that the iPhone is, like you say, a beautiful piece of software wrapped in a beautiful piece of hardware. And the fact that it's running on OS X is a fantastic development. I think I would speak for many developers, perhaps thousands of independent developers, who would love to write apps for that platform, because I believe it's going to be a tremendous platform for the future. But the indications are so far that it's closed, and I was wondering if you could comment on that, and do you see it opening up for developers in the future?
Sure, it's a good question. This is a very important trade-off between security and openness, right? And what we want is we want both. We want to have our cake and eat it too. And so we're working through a way. We've got some pretty good ideas that we're working through. And I think sometime later this year, we will find a way to do that, because that is our intent.
Find a way to open it up so that third-party developers...
Find a way to let third parties write apps and still preserve the security.
But at the start, until you get that in place...
Until we can find that way, we can't compromise the security of the phone. This is something that has to...
Is this a network issue? Is this an AT&T issue? I mean, when you say the security of the phone?
I won't mention names, but I've used, we've all used a lot of smartphones that crash more than once a day. And the more third-party apps you put on them, the more they crash. And we don't, we're going to... Nobody's perfect, but we'd sure like our phone not to crash once a day or more. And so we would like to solve this problem. I think we're going down some really good avenues to do it. If you could just be a little more patient with us, I think everybody can get what they want.
Thank you.
Yep.
Over here.
Tim Balcom with Polyfuel. Steve, I must be one of the weirdos. Thank you very much for this video iPod. My kids and I watch all kinds of TV shows, even sharing with one little screen and one earphone in each of our ears. So thanks very much. We're one of the weirdos that does that. We work with a lot of the Asian consumer electronics companies that you say don't do software particularly well. And we're working to try and help enable them to run extended run times on their portable devices so that they can get these devices to deal with live TV. One of the things that they complain about is that limited battery run time is one of the things that's limiting the ability to do that when people buy that. What's your view on that?
Well, I think when you're talking about a portable device, whether it be a notebook or an iPod or a phone, it's all about power. It's all about battery life. And so, fortunately, we've been fighting that fight for a long, long time with our notebooks, right, with our Macs. And so we've got a lot of technology for managing power. I think Macs are pretty well known for managing power quite a bit, kind of the best of breed in the PC industry. And we've applied a lot of that and learned a lot more from iPods. And so we were able to bring all of all those things we'd learned together in the phone. And I'd say you've hit upon one of the key problems in portable devices. It's just power.
Jan?
Steve, first of all, thank you. Also, I'm 20-year plus Mac addict and still hooked. I wanted to ask you a question. 2 years ago when you were here, you'd had a really rough time, and I asked you how you were. Apple is healthy, and you had been through all kinds of hell. 2 years later, 2.5 years later, how are you now?
Oh, thank you. I'm still vertical. I'm feeling great, thank you.
Dave Jaworski with Pass Along Networks, and we have about 2 million songs in MP3 format today that we use to power FYE, Sam Goody, and other brands. And when we have the EMI catalog, it will be MP3. You talked about interoperability and how DRM-free opens that up, but your DRM-free is AAC. So if I have a Sony reader that plays MP3 files, I can play any song I buy in MP3 format or that I rip from CDs. If I have my Garmin GPS, it will play MP3 files. But if I buy DRM free from iTunes, I have to go through a transcoding process, and the consumer doesn't really understand transcoding, or else they have to rip it and burn it. In their case, they're no better off than they were with buying a DRM file, and they lose all the metadata, the artist name, the track name. Why not make Apple's DRM free mean MP3 and get rid of the confusion that is being created for the consumer?
Well, the answer, first of all, let me point out a few things. Number one, of course, all the MP3s that you guys sell will play just fine on iPods. And number two, the reason we chose AAC in the first place is for a given data rate, it's significantly superior to MP3 in its audio quality. So it's a much better encoder. And we don't own it. We license it. Anyone can go license it. As a matter of fact, a bunch of people have. Microsoft has. Most of the players out there have gone and licensed AAC, and they do play AAC. So I'm sure you can name a list of people that don't, but they can easily go out and license it, and they'll play it. But most of the big players out there now do play AAC, because A, it is a superior codec, and B, they want to be able to play stuff that iTunes, people rip their CDs in iTunes, and most of them choose to rip it into AAC. They want to be able to play that stuff, and they can today. Anyone can go license AAC. It's a totally open standard.
And they're not licensing it from you.
They're not licensing it from us.
Some industry body or somebody.
Absolutely. Yeah. So just like MP3, by the way, MP3 isn't free. We go license it from an industry body. AAC is actually much simpler to license than MP3 is. So we're not trying to keep anybody out. We're just trying to use a superior technology which results in much better audio quality at any given data rate. And others seem to agree with us because they seem to be putting AAC into their products more and more. And so, you could encode all your stuff in AAC if you wanted to as well. It'd be really easy. But even if you don't, all the iPods still play MP3.
Over here.
Jonathan Kaplan from Pure Digital Technologies. Always great to have you on stage. It's enjoyable to listen to you, Steve.
Thanks.
My question is really around capture. I'm the CEO of a young company that makes capture devices, and traditionally Apple has stayed out of the capture part of both still and video. And with the iPhone now, there is a camera on there, so capturing still will happen, and I'm just curious how worried I need to be about you deciding that you want to get into the capture space, given that the on-ramp to the YouTubes of the world tend to be big devices that are difficult to connect with terrible software.
Well, I mean, we do also build video cameras into most of our computers now, and
You can't
so
take those with you. So
what's that?
you don't take those really. It's not a very portable way to capture video. Move your Mac around.
Oh, MacBooks are pretty tiny, but
The woman on the slingshot could hold her MacBook while she's flying through the
Phil Schiller held a MacBook as he jumped off a. Yeah, but we're not planning on getting into the camcorder market.
That's a great answer.
That's what's your answer.
Love that.
We actually have time for one more question. I'm sorry, right over here.
Thank you. Steve, thanks for being here. I'm Scott Heiferman from Meetup. You shook my world. You are been a hero of mine. When I heard, when I was 12 years old, that you challenged John Scully to change the world. You seem obsessed with. I was going to ask a silly question, like, do you read the fake Steve Jobs blog? The real question here that is meaningful to me is, what you're obsessed with Hollywood and entertainment and all these these movie trailers and stuff, but is that irrelevant, or what really changes the world moving forward?
I have read a few of the fake Steve Jobs things recently, and I thought they were pretty funny. And I get asked a lot if I know who it is, and I don't. But it is pretty funny.
I don't write it.
Maybe it's Walt. I am interested in storytelling. I got involved with Pixar a long time ago, and I'm one of the cheerleaders at Disney still, and I love a lot of stuff that they do. So I love storytelling. But what we do at Apple is we try to make tools for people in the end, and tools to enjoy entertainment, tools to communicate, tools to create, whether it's Macs or phones or iPods. And what we find is that this age we're living in, these computer-based tools, can always surprise you on the upside. We didn't design Apple TV thinking about YouTube, but here it is. We didn't design iTunes thinking about education, but one of the things we announced this morning was called iTunes U, where there's I think it's 17 universities, and there's hundreds in the pipe, are putting their courseware on iTunes to where their students and even anybody can access it. And what they're doing is they're taping lectures, either audio or videotaping lectures by their best professors, and they're putting them on their servers so their students don't have to sit there and take notes and not pay attention to the lecture. They can just listen to the lecture, and they can go get a copy of it and put it on their iPod and take notes later. And alumni can get at it, and kids that don't even go to the university can get at it. And it's MIT and Stanford and Berkeley and all these great universities. And this is iTunes, and it's free. And so, who would have thought? And so that's why I love what we do, because we make these tools, and they're constantly surprising us in new ways and what we can do with them.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks a lot.
Hey, just get the pencil. Okay.
Yeah, my sister walked out with that in both of those ways.
Good reasoning for coffee. Okay. Mark, you is. Find your name and sign by it. Today's mostly like a lab day, so questions. That's exactly it. So you explain it. So that's the simplest way of putting it. There you go. I like it. Basically, having fun is coding, though, of course, right? The thing I told the class as a challenge is, like, last class we did the enemy follows you, right? You did that, right? So now that's triggered by begin play. But what if you were to make it so that's triggered when the battery runs out on a light or something? Triggered after you pick up a certain number of batteries. And then I said, well, now that you pick up batteries, why don't you duplicate your battery object blueprint and make something else you pick up, like notes or clues, and like do that. Maybe it comes after you if you get 3 clues or whatever. So.
Kind of like Slenderman after you get the first page.
Yeah, that's the pages, exactly, right? Yeah, and then he gets worse if the pages go on, right? By the third page, he's faster, he's more present.
Scares the crap out of you.
Yeah, so that's the idea. So that's my challenge. So if people really want to know how to do it, I can come give hints, but it's like if you want to do that sort of thing, I suggest trying to experiment, figure out, fail a little, and then you probably will succeed. This guy's doing something. You remember that? Making a new level. Oh, you're doing it last time? You catching up? Yeah.
So if I want to create like another, like if I want to just like stop from this and then add a new little, thing, how would I like talk about like put it in here and all that?
What is the new thing you want to add?
No, like not into here, but make another world.
Oh, you want to make another level?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's really easy.
Because like you're right, like it's like all the geometry,
Tossing,
like this.
But you want to use, you don't want to have to redo your slender, you have to redo any of that. So for that, it's really easy. So since you have working objects, those objects remain constant throughout the whole project. You can change your third person, for example, to a third person character. He's forever like that, and no matter what project map you be on. Those things aren't unique to the map, like the way your geometry is unique to the map. So there's a couple ways you can do it. Go ahead and hit the X. But this one is right click and empty space. And literally, you hit level. And just name it whatever you want to name it, new level.
Your name will be
And this way, I'm going to show you 2 ways of how to do this. So we're doing the first way. This first way is going to give us a blank level. Okay. Maybe exactly what you want. Go ahead and double click that. It's good to say. So this is a completely blank level. It's even more blank than our third person map when we started with the template. There's nothing in here. So you want to drag out, you want to do a landscape, you want to drag out maybe a little bit of lighting, and then some fog if you want, although we will leave the fog on the last map. So this would be starting from scratch. But the other one, Joshua, that I want to show you is if you go find your original world under geometry, so find the map that's probably under third person. So you have third, or actually it's a master. Okay, so hit third person. Hit third person blueprint. Hit the open map. So that's the map with all the geometry. Right click. You can duplicate that. And then rename that, and that way you can go in and just delete the stuff that you want, and then we would be starting absolutely from scratch. So once you name this, I don't know, geometry map, or you can always rename it later. Or geometry map copy, yeah. And if you double click that, go ahead and do that. And then hit save here. Just double click that. This is going to be an exact copy of all the work you've done already, except you can just start deleting things because you have your original map here. You're on, and just to make sure what map you're on, you can always look at here to name your map. So you can start deleting stuff, but if there's things you want to leave, like the lights or whatever it is, or some maybe a second map image, I don't know, then you can work with this.
Yeah. Is there a way, like, for a player to go between levels? Because now I'm interested in this. Like, if I wanted, like, if the house thing, it has too much geometry or stuff that's starting to get a bit laggy, if I want him to go into attic to be, or the attic to be just like a bigger than what it seems, how would the player?
So you're describing exactly what level loading is all about. In games, the reason that there's loading screens that come up is they basically are unloading the level you're just in and they're loading in a new level. So in the real, there's a way for us to hit blueprints and then click open level blueprint. I haven't showed you guys this. You can code on the level itself, which is pretty useful. So what I'm going to do is to show you the different nodes. So right click and type in load. You see there's several different options come up. let's see, you have, okay, so you have these load stream level, unload stream level. Those are interesting because those load in levels that are called level streaming, so it would be more like instant without a load stream. And then the other option in there that you want, which is a little bit more simpler, because you get to sort of set up the level streaming for that, is open level. So put open level. Okay, and literally you put in the name of the level. So to test this is you can name that, name it whatever geomap, although geomap looks exactly the same right now. But it has to be spelt exactly the same, the address cross quarters. And then what you can do is use something like a box collision. This is kind of how Skyrim does it, is if you go into a cave, there's no door you click or anything, it just knows it once you're near that cave entrance, it starts loading into the cave. It's because you're crossing invisible box collisions. So you drag it on here, go from here, and then now type in collision, COL. Alright, actually no, it's not called collision, it's called box triggers. Bring in box trigger, you can resize that. If the player collides with that, when you go down here, so more details of the box trigger, scroll to the bottom. Oh, they don't have it up here? Okay. So with the box trigger selected, go to your level blueprint or leave spawn. The level blueprint is active for every level, so right click. And since you have it selected, it already has create a reference button, or you hit add event, and click add event. The top one, yeah. Just click the arrow so it drops down. And do collision. And we already know this on-begin overlap. Right? So you just do that, you do the cast to, make sure it's the player, it's going to go faster, and then do open level. And that should, assuming there's nothing else has to be done, open the new level in your player view.
Alright, so it'll be like this.
Yeah, well you got to cast to your player, the character, person character in between. But basically that would be it.
Alright, awesome.
Thank you.
You go to
Good questions, guys. Any other questions I could answer right now? Also, you guys can help each other out too if you want. People are behind.
What if whenever he jumps, he flies? Okay, what should okay. Okay, so character movement while walking, character movement while falling, character
Character what?
what looks like? Doesn't it look like a glitch? You're like, what happened?
This is like mind blown, bro. It's like mind blown. Okay. You see that. Side look. So my enemy is supposed to be 5 feet away from me, right? Some good glory. Yes. Your cock. Cut. What catches you on your look. Oh no. You just freeze. Look, I said it to
Yep.
So I put my bad guy at accepted radius like 2, but he gets me like when he's on like the 3rd floor for some reason.
What's it defaulted as, the accepted radius? Like when you start? So you made it less than 5, and how do you know it's getting you? Is there
So we're going to start off with kind of an easy one. Just this week, you surpassed
But
Microsoft in
is he stopping for some other reason, or
market
is that
valuation,
on
and we thought you
success
might have a
event
thought or two
being
about
triggered?
that.
So what I would do, I want to have you test it. I want to see how you figure it out.
For those of us that have been
I
in
would
the
add a
industry a
print
long time,
string
it's
on the
surreal.
end of that on success trigger,
But
and name the print string
doesn't
in the
matter very
we already did print strings, right?
It's not what's
With you?
important. It's not,
With the flashlight?
what makes you come to work in the morning. It's not why any of our
Yeah.
customers
Do you
buy
remember
our
that?
products.
If not,
So,
come explain.
I think it's good for us to keep that in mind and just remember what we're doing and why we're doing it.
But I just have to
But
ask
it is a little surreal.
Print string, and
It is
a
a little
print
surreal.
string basically
And-
sends a
and
piece
I
of
remember
text,
talking
whatever
to
you
you
want to
right
write,
when you were
to
coming
the
back to
screen
Apple.
on your left while you play.
We
And you would name that
a number
like
of times,
on
and
success
if I
event
remember correctly,
fired,
the company was
or
sort of on its way to
successfully
oblivion.
got
Oh, it was on the
to
rocks,
player,
yeah.
or something like that, so that
So,
when you see it, you know what's
Could you
what's
ever have
happening.
imagined something like this?
And
Even though I know
I
market
think what's going
cap
to happen
don't
is
like
if you
people
do
firing
that,
products or anything. It's
once
just
you
like,
hit play,
what did it
your
feel
guys, it's not going to get fired. I think there's something else going on.
Well, Apple was about 90 days
But
away
let's
from
see.
going
So
bankrupt
let me know when you've tested
in the
that
early
and what
days.
happens.
And it was much worse than I thought when I went back initially. But there were people there who I'd expected all the good people would have left. And I found these miraculous people, these great people, and I said, why? I tried to ask this as tactfully as I could, why are you still here? And a lot of them had this little phrase. They said, because I bleed in 6 colors.
Yeah.
Which was the old 6-color Apple logo. And that was code for, because I love what this place stands for, or at least stood for. And that just made all of us want to work that much harder to have it survive and have those values survive and bring it back.
So we want to spend most of this session talking about your thoughts from your really interesting position, because the conference is sort of about the juncture of technology and media, and you're sitting there right at that juncture in a lot of ways. I want to spend most of the session talking about where you think things are going in the future. But there have been some controversies lately that we want to ask you about, and I guess I'd start with Flash and your sort of war with Adobe. So you published a long, open letter, something like, what did you call it, Thoughts on Flash or something like that. So you've clearly stated your case there. But even if, here's my question, even if everything you say in there is true about its inferiority as a technology and other things being available to replace it and already replacing it, is it really fair or the best thing for consumers who buy, say, an iPad or an iPhone to just be abrupt? In other words, if we're in a transition where there are better things in Flash, why be abrupt and cut off consumers?
Sure. Well, 2 things. Number one, I'll come back in a minute to what really happened there, because what you said isn't exactly chronologically correct. But Apple is a company that doesn't have the most resources of everybody in the world. And the way we've succeeded is by choosing what horses to ride really carefully, technically. We try to look for these technical vectors that have a future and that are headed up. And technology, different pieces of technology kind of go in cycles. They have their springs and summers and autumns, and then they go to the graveyard of technology. And so we try to pick things that are in their springs. And if you choose wisely, you can save yourself an enormous amount of work versus trying to do everything. And you can really put energy into making those new emerging technologies be great on your platform, rather than just okay because you're spreading yourself too thin. So we have a history of doing that. As an example, we went from the 5-inch floppy disk to the 3.5-inch floppy disk with the Mac.
Before other people, right?
We were the first to do that. We made the 3.5-inch floppy disk popular. Sony invented it, and we put it in the first products. And there were some good reasons we did that. We got rid of the floppy disk altogether in 1998 with the first iMac. We also got rid of these things called serial and parallel ports, and we were the first to adopt USB, even though Intel had invented it. You first saw it in mass on iMacs. And so we have gotten rid of things. We were one of the first to get rid of optical drives with the MacBook Air. And I think things are moving in that direction as well. And sometimes when we get rid of things like the floppy disk drive on the original iMac, people call us crazy.
Or at least premature, maybe.
No, they call us crazy.
Oh, okay.
stops then, right? Or are you?
But sometimes you just have to pick the things that look like they're going to be the right horses to ride going forward. And Flash looks like a technology that had its day, but is really is waning. And HTML5 looks like the technology that's really on the ascendancy right now. And to incorporate Flash into systems is a lot of work. There's no smartphone shipping with Flash on it now, as you know.
But you know that there will be, right?
Well, you know, there's going to have been for the last 2 or 3 years, and every 6 months it gets updated. So I'm sure that eventually they will. And there's a lot of issues with that in terms of battery life and, you know, security and other things. But more importantly, HTML5 is starting to emerge. You know, there's been an avalanche of people that have said, we're doing HTML5 video. And the video looks better, and it works better, and you don't need a plug-in to run it. And so while 75% of the video in the web may be in Flash, you know, 25% going to 50% very shortly is also available in HTML.
So do you say that to consumers? I mean,
Yeah,
talking besides technology, it's consumers.
I think consumers outside of the Valley and our industry aren't having this issue.
Except when they hold up their iPad and they go to a web page and there's like a hole there where a video would be.
You know,
They don't know. They may not know what Flash is.
There are holes in some websites, but those holes are getting plugged real fast. You know, the holes that exist now are ads. So I understand that's a problem for some people.
Not entirely.
Not entirely, but that's the #1 holes that are there.
And what about the other community that I think is impacted by this, and that's developers? Because what I think a lot of the coverage of this Flash issue has overlooked is that, yes, Flash is a video container, and there are other video containers that actually have a very rising share, H.264 and native HTML5, but it's also a development environment, and there are entire websites, some of them quite beautiful, written on a Flash platform.
An even more popular development environment was HyperCard, and we were okay to axe that.
It wasn't more popular than Flash, was it?
Oh, in its day, sure it was.
On your platform, right?
No. HyperCard was huge in its day because it was accessible to anybody. Right. So, I mean, you could be a HyperCard developer.
Yeah, I don't know.
So,
I don't know about that.
But, you know, we have over 200,000 apps on the App Store. So something must be going right in terms of attracting developers to our platform.
So your goal, just to finish this up, your ultimate goal is to get rid of Flash or just to move? How
see, our goal is really easy. We didn't start off to have a war with Flash or anything else. We just made a technical decision that we weren't going to put the energy into getting Flash on our platform. We told Adobe, if you ever have this thing running fast, come back and show us, which they never did. And, but we think we're not going to use it. And that was it. And we shipped the iPhone, and it doesn't use Flash. And it wasn't until we shipped the iPad and it didn't use Flash that Adobe started to raise a stink about it. We didn't raise a stink about it. We never mentioned the word Adobe or Flash or anything else. We like Adobe. We have a lot of common customers with CS, you know, their Creative Suite software and things like that. So we weren't trying to have a fight. We just decided not to use one of their products in our platform. And so, you know, they started to say a lot of bad things about us in the press and this and that, and it went on for months. And that's why I wrote Thoughts on Flash, was because we were trying to be real professional about this and weren't talking to the press about it. We didn't think it was a matter for the press. And we finally just said, enough is enough. We're tired of these guys trashing us in the press over this. And so we wrote down the reasons why, technically, we didn't choose Flash. And they are just as true today as they were when we wrote it, as they were 6 months or a year before that.
And what would happen, just so this, I promise, we're going to move on to the next thing you don't want to talk about, but on this Flash thing, what would happen? I mean, you know, it's an open market. You do have competitors, particularly in the smartphone side, and you may have significant competitors in the tablet side. We have a couple of companies showing non-iPad tablets here this week.
This is America.
This is America. That's right. Well, it's LA, but it's part of America. Yeah. What if the market says, hey, you know, it's important enough to us to be able to run not just these videos, but whole websites. You know, there's a great photo editing site. I don't know if you've ever used it, called Picnic. It's a lovely site. It really works like a smooth, slick, native client on your computer, but it's written in. It's it's a Flash site on the web. I mean, it probably uses other technologies too, but it doesn't work on the iPad. What if people say, you know, the iPad is crippled in this respect?
Well, you know, well, I'd say two things. Number one, things are packages of emphasis. Some things are emphasized in a product, some things are not done as well in a product, some things are chosen not to be done at all in a product. And so different people make different choices. And if the market tells us we're making the wrong choices, we listen to the market. We're just people running this company. We're trying to make great products for people. And so we have at least the courage of our convictions to say, we don't think this is part of what makes a great product. We're going to leave it out. Some people are going to not like that. They're going to call us names. It's not going to be in certain companies' vested interests that we do that, but we're going to take the heat because we want to make the best product in the world for customers. And we're going to instead focus our energy on these technologies, which we think are in their ascendancy and we think are going to be the right technologies for customers. And you know what? They're paying us to make those choices. That's what a lot of customers pay us to do, is to try to make the best products we can. And if we succeed, they'll buy them. And if we don't, they won't. And it'll all work itself out. So you know, so far I'd have to say that people seem to be liking iPads, you know? I mean, we've sold one every 3 seconds since we launched it. So I don't know how it's going to turn out.
Takes you 3 whole seconds to sell one? Can't you get that?
Right now, I'm just worried that it's taking us 3 whole seconds to make one. Because we could be selling them faster, it seems like.
Obviously, you have shy and retiring opinions about this. You've been emailing a lot lately. This is riveting to a lot of people. I know it sounds silly outside of Silicon Valley, but a lot of people are riveted. What's happened in your communication style? Because you've been emailing people, you've been emailing people at the Valleywag and stuff like that.
Well, he never identified himself as a journalist, but I was working late one night. It actually was like 2 in the morning, I think.
Yeah.
And I was working on, I'm making a presentation next Monday, and I was working on that presentation, and this guy starts emailing me these obnoxious emails, and I'm just enough of a sucker that I want to like straighten this guy's thinking out. So I start to, respond to him, and he responds back. He's not, he's no dummy, and he's responding back, and we got into this conversation. It was kind of entertaining.
Yeah, it was.
And then he publishes it. So,
well, a lot of
that's
your emails
okay.
are getting published.
Yeah, I know.
You just like to email now? What's happened?
But you are like even just customers, not just that exchange. So they're very short a lot of times.
I've actually always done a bit of that.
Okay, all right. So you had a prototype of one of your products that was wound up in a bar, and have you heard of? Has this come to your attention? I don't know, because you're the CEO, and I don't know whether lower levels are handling it, but and then there was a blog that paid somebody some money. We don't really know the whole story because the investigation, I guess, is underway with the police. But I wanted to ask you your reaction to sort of a duality about this, because I think there are people in the public and in journalism who don't approve of somebody, of sort of checkbook journalism, if you want to call it that, the way that was done, if what we know is true. And I want to keep stressing that because I don't know that we know the whole thing yet. But on the other hand, then the police go and they don't issue a subpoena, which somebody's lawyers could fight in court about taking this guy's computers, but they go and get a search warrant and they grab them. And one presumes, and again, I don't know, but I know if they took my computer, there's notes and things for many companies and many sources and stories and things that wouldn't necessarily be relevant to whatever the police are looking at. It was just like a giant grab of a journalist's sort of assets of all the background of what that guy was doing.
Or a guy's assets, at least.
Well,
you could debate what a journalist is. But yeah.
We could debate it, but I mean, we think bloggers are journalists. You know, we run a blog, so we think bloggers are journalists. And the New York Times runs blogs. The Wall Street Journal runs blogs. I don't think that's much of a debate anymore. But anyway, the point is, so. Where do people come down on this? I mean, what do you think? What do you come
Well,
down?
I can just tell you what, there is an ongoing investigation by the DA, and I'm not current on it, but I can tell you what I do know.
Okay.
One of our employees, you know, to make a wireless product work well, you have to test it. And there's no way to test it in a lab completely, so you actually have to carry them and test them out. And one of our employees was carrying one, and there is a debate as to whether it was left in a bar or stolen out of his bag, but I don't know the answer to that. And the person that ended up with the phone decided they would try to sell it to somebody, so they called Engadget and they called Gizmodo. It turned out that the person that got the phone tried to activate it by plugging it into his roommate's computer, a woman, and she saw him evidently destroying some evidence, and she's the one that called the police, and that's why they got the search warrant.
Did she call the police or did she call Apple?
She called the police, and because she didn't want to get implicated, supposedly. I'm just telling you what I've been told. And so the police came and felt that they needed to grab some stuff before it was all before it all disappeared. And so this is a story that's amazing. It's got theft, it's got buying stolen property, it's got extortion. I'm sure there's sex in there somewhere, you know.
Really?
And so somebody should make a movie out of this.
Well, we've got some movie producers.
But and it was reported that the police broke down